Hello, my name is Marcus, and today we're going to be creating this. So now we're back in After Effects and we just have this simple text in the middle of the frame. So let's start immediately by pre-composing it. Control-Shift-C. Let's just call it text. There we go. Bam-a-lama ding-dong. Let's go back into our main comp, and already now let's start setting up the control layer. So go up into Layer, New, Null Object, and let's call this bad boy Controller. And let's apply a good old-fashioned fractal noise. Double click on that bad boy. And I'm gonna click on this, go up into Edit, copy with property links, and go back into the text comp here. And I'm gonna make a new layer, New, Solid. We're gonna call this bad boy Alpha, like a wolf. And then just paste onto this layer. See, now the effects are linked into the main comp. So let's go into the main comp again. So let's just quickly go through this. Let's add some contrast. Let's go into transform, make it quite large. Maybe hit it over into threads, as I recall, maybe invert it. And let's see here. Let's just play around with the contrast quite a smidge so that when we increase the brightness, yeah, it has a little bit more. We can even decrease the complexity down to 5 or something. Maybe even scale it a little bit more up, something like this. Now let's just keyframe this already. So go over to maybe second 7 and let's make it completely bright, something like this. Make a keyframe, go over to the start and just take it all the way down until it's completely black, something like this. And there we go. So go back into the text layer and set, if you go down here into toggle switches and modes, you can set this layer to be, where are you? Stencil Luma. And see, now the cool thing is it's going to use the luminance from this alpha layer to mask out the text, which is, come on, that's just cool. So now let's start setting this entire shindig up here. So let's start by, well, we can actually fill this out with black so that we can see what we're doing in a smidge. So tint, or we can actually give it a fill instead, double click. Just make it black. It basically fills the entire layer within its alpha to whatever color you give it. Let's just duplicate this and let's call this text base. Now let's delete this fill effect and apply a tint instead, because we want to be able to control the white and the black values. And then set the white to 50% white, well, basically gray, right? Halfway through. Now let's apply a glass effect. Wham-a-lama ding-dong. And let's start playing around with this bad boy. So already now we can set it to overlay, which means that it's going to take the values above 50 and below 50 and apply them accordingly. So you can see the darkness. It's a little bit, so let's just play around with these settings. Something like this. And we actually don't want any ambient. We want very low diffuse and we want a lot of specular. So we can get these nice highlights and play around with the roughness until you start to see some highlights appearing. Now let's set the light type to AE lights. This way we can create our own lights to light this thing, basically. So go up into layer, new, and light. There we go. And we want a parallel light, which is basically an infinite light like the sun. And we're going to make it like quite green. A little bit of, you know, that nice poisonous look. Let's press P to reveal the position and Control-Shift-H to reveal the UI or the GUI. Now let's just play around with this bad boy a smidge. Already now we're getting some nice rim light, but it's very subtle. So I'm going to press Shift-T to bring up the intensity. I'm just going to crank it up a smidge and just push this back a bit so we get this nice juicy rim light. I'm going to duplicate this bad boy and I'm going to take it all the way over to the other side and maybe a little bit from above, something like this. And we can even change the color if we want. Maybe we want it to be a little bit more desaturated because we want this to be like the main light or something. So now we're going to create the displacement for the layers or the displacement map. So I'm going to duplicate this text, which I'm going to duplicate quite a lot of times throughout this comp. It's a little bit of a puzzle. I'm going to delete this fill and I'm going to apply a simple choker to begin with. Bam-a-lama ding-dong. I'm going to apply a fast blur. Bam-a-lama ding-dong. And I'm going to apply a curves effect because I want to adjust the alpha and the brightness of this layer. And last but not least, I'm going to apply a set matte effect. All right, so let's start looking at this. I'm gonna isolate it so I only can see that layer. I'm gonna start choking it in so we basically only get the center of the text. And then I'm gonna blur it a little smidge of a hint, something like this. So we start getting like these more concentrated area pixels and other areas less concentrated, so to speak. And you can always play around with this. You can go into alpha in the curves and you can play around with this, boost it a bit. This is going to become more relevant when you start applying the other effects and you start to modify this layer to adjust to your desires. So now we're going to create the morph layer. So I'm going to actually duplicate the base layer here so we have a place to start. I'm going to call this morph. There we go. And we already have the glass and the whatever and what have you, and I'm already going to set this bump map texture, the glass effect, to look at the displacement. And there we go. And let's set it to look at effects and masks as well, because we have some effects on this displacement layer and we wanted to follow that. We can even isolate it to see what it is we're doing. So you can see it has like this nice highlighty and bulginess to it, right? And that's come on, that's what we want. That's what we all want in life. But we also want to add a little bit more to it. So let's apply another effect called displacements, which I cannot write. Holy heck. Displacement map. There we go. Duplicate. Double click on that bad boy. Nothing's happening. Click on morph and apply displacement map. And let's put it before the glass effect. And let's set it to also look at the text displacement. And of course, effects and masks, everything. And let's set it to look at luminance on both channels. So we start to get like these nice, bulginess happening here because it's basing on the alpha of that layer or the luminance of that layer. So it also starts to have these nice organic movements, and that's what we want, a little bit of juiciness. And you can apply a curves effect to this as well if you want to give it more oomph, just boost the alpha or whatever you want, to give a little bit more shape. So next we're going to be looking at the text wobble. So I'm going to once again take this main text layer, I'm going to duplicate it and call it wobble. There we go. Just gonna eliminate this fill effect, and now let's just isolate it here so we can see what it is we're doing. So first of all, we're gonna apply a simple choker. So set this choker to -3 because we wanted to go in the opposite direction. We actually wanted to expand beyond its original alpha value. Let's duplicate this choker and let's set it to like 12. We're going to be changing this afterwards anyway. Now let's apply a tint effect here. Tint, double click. Let's set them both to white. The reason for this is once you expand a matte beyond its original borders, it's going to start applying black color because it doesn't have any color information. So we have to apply a tint again to make sure that it keeps that correct color. And now we're going to mask it by itself, its original alpha. So CC Composite, double click, and we can set this bad boy to Silhouette Alpha. Now look at this coolness. It's actually taking its original alpha and masking it on top of whatever effect we've done here. So let's start applying some other effects here. So let's apply another simple choker because we want to expand this nice matte that we've made to something along these lines. So we get this nice thick effect, and we can apply a fast blur because we want it to be a little bit softer and not just so gosh darn harsh. And last but not least, let's apply a solid composite. This will fill the frame and basically it will fill the transparency with whatever color you give it. So I'm going to give it a 50% white or gray, basically, because we're going to use this layer as a displacement layer. And when you use displacement, gray means that it won't displace either up or down. It's only white will displace in the positive value and black will displace in the negative value, so to speak. And let's call this layer text wobble disp, because this is actually going to be the displacement layer for the wobble effect. Now we're actually going to duplicate this layer and use it as an additional effect. So duplicate it and call this, just text wobble, that's fine. Now we can activate it and set it already now to color dodge. And we can eliminate the solid composites and let's apply the same glass effect that we have on maybe the morph here. Let's just apply these two effects, the glass and the curves, on the wobble. There we go. And we wanted to look at itself, so let's set it to 8. There we go. So see, now we start to get like these nice additional sliminess at the edge where it's revealing the text, right? We get these additional highlights, and that's just, come on, that's just sexy. To give it a little bit more deliciousness, we can actually duplicate this text morph, and I'll just call the text morph top, which makes absolutely no sense, but nonetheless, I'm gonna do it. And now I'm gonna set the displacement map to look at the text wobble. There you go. I can actually see I messed up a smidge here, so under the text wobble layer, instead of choosing the mask or effects and mask, just set it to source because it's just gonna sample itself. And now back here in text morph top, we can set the text morph to look at text wobble, effects and masks. And the same with the CC glass, we want to look at the morph and texts and masks. Now we can start applying some extra shine effects to the layers here. So we can actually, in the wobble displacement, we can actually offset it a smidge so that it's actually coming on a little bit after everything else. So it's a little bit offset and adds that extra component to it. So let's duplicate this text-based layer here and let's call it shine. Whamalamadingo. Set it all the way down here. Let's set it to screen. There we go. Let's play around with these things here. So first of all, let's set this to text displacement. There we go. And effects and masks. And let's apply a displacement map. And let's put it before the glass. And let's set it to look at the text wobble. Where are you? Text wobble displacement and effects and masks. So we get that additional displacement on this bad boy. I'm just going to go through this like something dramatic. So you can really start to see it really bulges things out. And creates like these nice highlights all around the place. So now let's apply the grossness layer. So let's go up here into layer, new, solid. Let's say grossness. And sure, let's make it black. There we go. And let's apply a good old-fashioned, you guessed it, fractal noise. Bam-a-lam-a-ding-dong. Now let's apply a set matte. Not say, set matte. There we go. And make it reference the text underneath with the effects and masks. And let's set the grossness to screen because we primarily wanted to take the bright colors and add them on top. We can play around with the contrast and the size. And you can already now add some evolution to it. So hold Alt down, click on evolution, and times, I don't know, 150, something like this. Now, right now, after it's done morphing, these two layers actually persist, as you can see, and we don't actually want that. Around these here parts, we're gonna actually add a transform effect. Transform. Where are you? There we go, double click. And we can just animate the opacity in this bad boy. So click on the opacity, go all the way over to second 7. And just take opacity all the way down. There we go. And press U to bring up the keyframes. And J to go to the previous keyframe. Then I'm going to click on this transform effect, go up into edit, copy with property links, and apply to the top version as well. Paste. There we go. So the grossness is a little bit too harsh, so you can just play around with this until you're satisfied. It just needs like these nice small highlights here and there. So the text shine is also quite hefty right now, so you can also play around with the displacement of this. Maybe it's a little bit too much. You can tone it down, you can tone down the softness, whatever you want until it actually looks the way you want it to. Decrease the height a smidge. And now let's start making the shine effects. So just duplicate the text down here, take it all the way down, and call it glow, baby. And now let's start applying a good old-fashioned glow effect. Bam-a-la-ba-dang-gong. Glow, double click. And already now let's take the threshold down to 10, take this glow radius up to 30, take it over to A and B colors because we want full control. Start with a nice yellow, maybe a little bit greenish yellow, something like this. And then copy that and make it a little bit more saturated. Something like this. And let's duplicate this glow here. And we can crank it up a smidge. And right now we're not seeing much. Now that's because it's looking at the color channels, which is black. So it's basically taking nothing. So you can take it to alpha channel instead, and then we'll look at the alpha. And let's start by playing around with this a smidge. So now we want this base text to also have some, movement and morphiness and disgustingness. So let's start applying a displacement map. And there we go. And let's set it to be the wobble displacement. and effects and masks. And of course, as always, luminance and all that stuff. We can actually set it all the way up to 60, because now you can see it actually gets like these nice, weird, distorted stuff to it. We can just keyframe these to displacements all the way down to nothing. There we go. Now we can even duplicate this displacement map and eliminate the keyframes. And let's set it to look at the grossness. Now see, now we run into a problem because it cannot look at the effects and masks, because grossness is looking at the text for its alpha here. So let's eliminate the set matte from grossness, and let's make a new layer, new, solid. Let's call this alpha. And let's apply the set matte to this layer instead. There we go. Bam-a-lama ding-dong. Make it look at the text layer, effects and masks. And now we can get the grossness to alpha matte with this new layer. And done. So this text is now looking at the grossness layer to create this nice little distortion thing. And I'm going to set it all the way down to 2. It's all about making it as gross as possible, right? Just make it gross. And now last but not least, let's create these nice juicy rays at the end. So go up into layer, new, solid. Let's call this rays. Let's make it completely white. Bam. And now let's go up here into mask, ellipse tool. And now let's just make a cute little circle in the middle of the frame, something like this. You can even give it a little bit of feather, something like this, and take it all the way down underneath all the text and the glow and the thingamabobs. And we can even set the text glow to screen or something so that it adds together with the rays. Let's start applying some juicy effects to this thing. So first of all, roughen edges. That's going to control our actual rays. Next we have radio blur, CC radio fast blur, because we want it to go fast. Exactly, so already now we can crank this up, get some nice juiciness here. And actually just play around with the border here and the edge sharpness, because that way we're going to get more rays, and especially if you start playing around with the scale. See, now we're starting to get some juicy sexiness going on here, right? You can even animate this, so I'll click on evolution and write time times, I don't know, 50. Now we want a solid composite, because we don't want it to look at the alpha whatsoever. We're gonna make it completely black, so we have a completely solid frame. And last but not least, let's apply a toner effect. CC toner. And let's make it Pantone, and let's apply some of the same colors from the glow. So something nice and yellow, and then something a little bit less yellow, more poison green, and something really green. And we can even play around with the last one, make it like very dark green, something like this. So now we have some juicy rays as well. And let's just animate these over time. So let's say 7 seconds, we want them to be completely visible, and at the beginning none. So just keyframe the expansion of your mask, go all the way to the beginning and just expand inwards until there is nothing. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'm really looking forward to see what you guys can create with this convoluted setup. But hopefully you can get your own ideas that are considerably more simple and better, quite frankly. If you want to receive a mail whenever there are new templates, advanced templates, tools, presets, courses, etc., then I would recommend joining the newsletter. You can find the link in the description. If you like these type of text and logo reveal tutorials, then I can recommend the playlist that is showing on the screen here on the left. Have a wonderful day with some cheese.